Good morning and happy Father's Day. My name's Dean Miller, and it's my privilege to welcome you this morning to our worship. We are gathering together to worship God, to know His love for us, to be reminded of how much He loves us as our Father, and to be reminded of the mission we have to share His love in the world. It's a joy to be together, and if you're a guest, we hope you find a little more of God's love as you're with us, and you take a minute to check us out on our social media pages to see what's going on. Or if you got questions, you can just email me, dean@theascension.org, and ask me anything you want to know. We are starting something new this morning as we ramp into our summer series. Our worship online is going to be a little shorter than it's been. This will be every week at 10 a.m. still, but it'll be a shorter service because it'll mostly be a couple announcements and this sermon. So if you have a Bible, I'd encourage you to turn to Matthew 5. We start our series on the Sermon on the Mount this morning, and as you do that, let me highlight a couple of things coming up. First, we hope you'll take a minute and look and find this book to walk through our series with us. It's called What If Jesus Was Serious by a man named Skye Jetheni. It's unpacking the Sermon on the Mount. We really like it both for the content with words, but also pictures. And we chose it because we think it could be a great way for you not only to talk about with a roommate, a family member, a friend, but also with your kids. If you have kids, maybe you're a godparent, maybe you're a godfather on this call, and you will think, oh, I could get that and talk through this with my godson or goddaughter. So we encourage you to reach out and get that. The first few pages will be especially helpful as we kick this series off with your kids. So those of us who have kids this summer might want to use that at the dinner table to say, hey, let's ask some questions. What does it mean that God says you are blessed? What do we think it means that you're blessed? What are the things we might say, if you do this, we'll be blessed, that aren't really what God thinks are what we should be doing? So I'd encourage you to pick this book up and use it through this series. Also, next week on Sunday night, we will have our second church dessert after worship. We've been having popsicles and then had a shaved ice truck just a couple weeks ago. And that truck, Anita's Shaved Ice, will be back with us on Sunday night, the 27th. Again, a reminder, tonight, Sunday, the 20th of June, we go back to Sunday evening worship. So even if you're with us this morning, we'd still love to see you tonight. We'll have our regular worship back for the first time since March of 2020 on Sunday evenings in person at Cornerstone Evangelical Free Church at 5 o'clock. So we hope you see you there this week, but especially next week if you want to take part in Anita's Shaved Ice. Let's turn our hearts now to Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Again, this summer we're going to spend time in the Sermon on the Mount. We're partnering with our good friends at Christ Church Vienna. You're going to see me and Johnny sharing the preaching, and also Chris Lugo this summer. And this morning we're starting at the beginning to set some context and usher into the beginning of the sermon, which of course are the Beatitudes. As we do that, I want you to think about this question. If I was to ask you to pick one word that is how you would describe your fundamental person, this is really who I am. One word you could use to describe yourself, what would you use? What would a one-word description be? Again, as we turn our hearts to the sermon, we see that what Jesus is doing here is laying out in this part of Matthew and in several other sections in Matthew what it really means to be His disciple, what it fundamentally looks like to follow Jesus. And again, the question we're asking is the one you saw on the Skye Jetheni book. What if Jesus was serious about the Sermon on the Mount? What if what He's teaching here isn't supposed to be something that frustrates me or depresses me or discourages me, but rather it's supposed to let me know what it looks like to be in His kingdom and to follow Him? What should it look like in me, fundamentally, to be a Christian? Again, if you have a Bible, I'd encourage you to turn there. And as we jump in this morning, I want to give you a couple invitations as we go through this series. First, again, pick up the Jetheni book and use it. It's short. You can read the 2 or 3 pages. It covers each of the verses in just a few minutes and reflect on them. Second, I want to invite you to take one time a week through the summer and read through the entire Sermon on the Mount. It's Matthew 5, 6, and 7. It'll take you about 10 minutes. But I have invited Christ Church Vienna, and I'm inviting our church now, Church of the Ascension, to do that. Let's spend time this summer taking one time a week at least to read through the entire Sermon on the Mount, to get some sense of the scope and the overall breadth of teaching that Jesus is offering. Here in Matthew 5, we've had a ramp up into Jesus' public ministry. In chapter 3, Jesus was called and then affirmed at His baptism. He got baptized by John the Baptist, and then His Father told Him, "You are my Son, in whom you are well pleased," and He's ushered into His ministry. The first thing He does in that ministry is withdraw into the wilderness, where He's tested, of course, by the devil for 40 days. And now, if you go back and read through the second part of chapter 4 and right up into chapter 5, you can see He is ramping up into this really exciting interesting, amazing ministry. His life is flipped on its head. He's literally moved from Nazareth to Capernaum, which is a city in Galilee on the Sea of Galilee. He's now preaching, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. This is his consistent theme, repent. Hey, the kingdom of heaven is breaking into this world. Come be a part of it. And he's just called a few disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. The end of chapter 4 gives us this lovely summary of this change of life for Jesus. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases. Those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed. And Jesus healed them, and large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. That's an amazing paragraph. You might want to read that again on your own. But listen to all that's happening. It's incredibly exciting. Clearly what's being described there is happening over days and weeks. It didn't just happen one day. Jesus is moving throughout this huge region, and what he is doing is so astounding that the good news of him is spreading. If you were to chart from just Syria, just one of the places mentioned in this paragraph, all the way to this Capernaum, it's 150 miles. People are so excited about what Jesus is doing. They are walking 150 miles to hear about this man and what he's doing. And again, that's not the only place they're coming from. They're coming from not just from Jewish areas, but Gentile areas. You heard the word Decapolis, which is this 10 set of cities, 10 deca, that are Greek, speak Greek, Gentile cities. So people, Jew and Gentile, are forming this racial tension. Jesus is bringing people together under the umbrella of who he is and what he's doing. Why are they coming? They're coming because of this major verse in chapter 4. Turn your life around. The kingdom of heaven is here. What Jesus is saying is there's literally been an inbreaking from heaven into the history of our world. History is utterly changed because of what he's doing and him coming. This is really important because if you don't understand this, the Sermon on the Mount can just feel like an idealistic list of things to do that you and I will never achieve. It could be discouraging, break you down, or could just feel like idealistic platitudes. So those sound great for Jesus, but clearly they weren't meant for me. What Jesus is saying is here, hey, what you're tasting, what you're seeing, I'm healing the blind, I'm healing the sick, I'm preaching good news of what heaven is really like. Because in heaven, people aren't blind, people aren't sick, Jew and Gentile aren't enemies. What they are seeing is heaven literally breaking in. What he's about to describe and teach in greater depth in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is what heaven looks like, what it looks like when you and I follow him to represent heaven here on earth. No more sickness, no more demon possession, an entirely different value system. After that lovely summary paragraph, we get these few verses at the beginning of chapter 5. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. Teaching this way, the physical posture of Jesus teaching this way is a very powerful way to be taught. When someone would teach from a mountain and sit, it was sort of a way of saying this is a major rabbi. He has some real things to say. It's how you taught your disciples. And at the beginning of the sermon, we see, he is teaching a smaller subset. We're going to see later he taught these things to the crowds, but he's teaching a smaller subset of his disciples about these major things. Matthew was so aware of how powerful this teaching was as he collected them, and Matthew's often called the teaching gospel. We have five major sections of Jesus' teaching throughout the gospel. This is the first and most well-known of those 5 sets. You and I may have heard about this teaching. You may have heard the phrase the Sermon on the Mount, even if you're not a follower of Jesus yet. And if you hear those, you can just kind of rush through, Jesus is going to do some great teaching. But what we need to do is occasionally step back and go, why is Jesus doing this? Because if you see what's happening at the end of chapter 4, you can see, there's energy about what's happening. There's a revival forming. There's revolution forming. People are discipling, becoming disciples, following him. And it can feel a little crazy to hear Jesus drew away with this small group of people and began to teach them. In our day, imagine what it would be like if Jesus was doing these things, healing, casting out demons, healing the blind. With Instagram or TikTok, the number of views, the news reporters that would go follow up on the views they would see on TikTok and Instagram. This would be unbelievable, and it'd be easy to think, we're going to just ride the wave of enthusiasm and popularity. That's not what Jesus is doing. Why? Why is he doing that? Which brings me to my first of just 2 points for this morning. First, central to this kingdom of heaven Jesus is preaching, to the kingdom of heaven inbreaking into the world, is the forming of a kingdom people who witness in the world to the good news of the cross and the resurrection. Central to the gospel of Jesus is people, not ideas, but transformed people, disciples. What Jesus says to Peter and Andrew and James and John is, follow me. He's forming people. What that means is central to the good news of Jesus is you. Jesus wants to form you into being a disciple. Was Jesus serious? Yes, he was. He was serious about forming men and women and boys and girls into followers of Jesus, people who live like heaven here on earth. This is often called the upside down kingdom. He's living out a kingdom that makes no sense to the normal flow of our life. But it does make sense to the longings we have for love, for kindness, for forgiveness, for racism being broken down, for healing and no blindness, no COVID. That sort of kingdom is what we're desperate for. And so the reason he teaches, and his teaching is so stunning that Matthew compiles it, is because what he's trying to do is form disciples. And Matthew understands that. Remember, these healed people are not just yet disciples. You could be a blind healed man, but it doesn't mean you're going to follow Jesus. The deeper call than the healing of Jesus is to follow me. This teaching is going to teach us how to follow. Remember, where do we get the Great Commission from? Which gospel? Well, we get it from Matthew. What does Matthew say? Matthew 28. Go therefore, he reminds us, Jesus said, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations. Jesus is not saying, I came to teach a theology of the gospel of the kingdom of heaven. I came to teach and pour out books and DVDs. No, he's saying, I came to change people. So this summer, as we spend time, and as you, I hope, spend at least one day a week reading the whole Sermon on the Mount, it's utterly worth your time because it's Jesus forming you. It's Jesus' mission to form people being continued. So that's the first major point this morning. Second thing I want you to see this morning is fundamental to this good news of the gospel of Jesus and the transformation of people is the teaching is here. What is fundamental is here at the very beginning of the Beatitudes. The entire Sermon on the Mount is informed with this first line: blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall receive the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That's the fundamental principle of the kingdom of heaven. It's the fundamental principle of this sermon and of the Beatitudes. The word here for poor is one of two words Jesus could have used. This one is someone who is so poor they literally have no resources. The other one is someone who is very poor but still has a little bit. The word here that Jesus uses, utterly poor, nothing to bring. What Jesus is saying is, again, blessed are those who realize before God they have nothing to bring, that they have nothing they can offer. There's a man named Kent Hughes, a pastor, who has written a great commentary on the Sermon on the Mount, and he sort of paraphrases what this might mean to us a couple of times. He says this first: blessed are those who are so desperately poor in their spiritual resources that they realize they must have help from outside sources. He also says, blessed are those who realize that they have nothing within themselves to commend them to God, for this is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the people who realize they have run aground. They are out of resources. They don't have it in them. Which should be a real encouragement to you this morning. That place in your life that you feel like, I don't have it. I don't have it to love God. I don't have it to love my neighbor. I don't have it to love my friends. I don't have it to love my spouse, my kids. I don't have it to work hard. I don't have it to be honest about my loneliness or my shame or my sin or my temptations or how discouraged I am as I see the world, how hard it feels to fight racism, how overwhelmed I am by the way our country and the world has been over the last year. If you're at that place, this line and this sermon of Jesus is for you. Blessed are you who realize you are so poor you have to cry out to God for his help. What Jesus is encouraging us to do is to live in what I'll call heaven's fast lane. This is the central part of heaven, when you and I can say, like the prodigal son, I will go to my Father. I have nothing to offer, and I will cry for his help. You and I declare this when our competencies run out, when we can't credentialize our need away, when we can't distract ourselves enough from our pain, When we see our real selves, this is what we're able to say. And then we are utterly honest before God, and our heart and our life opens up to what Jesus has come to do. This sense that you and I can self-center our life and make it, if I can just do what I want to do, if I can just follow all the things I want to follow, I can create a life that's great and I will end in life. What heaven would tell you is that's a lie and it's going to end in death. And what Jesus is saying is, blessed are those who realize that now, as soon as possible. Now, this is a foreign way to think, isn't it? It'd be interesting for you to take some time this week to maybe make a list of what you really think is blessed. That's been something that's very provoking for me the last couple of weeks. If you boiled me down to what I really think is blessed, or you and I really think blessed are people like this because this, what might you say? What would your list of 8 things say? What might you say are subtly what you instill in your kids? Blessed are you if you're like this. Again, that's been a very compelling and painful thing for me to pray about. Think about, what do I really communicate to my children? We might say things like, blessed are those who are rich, because then, well, they won't have anxiety or need. Blessed are those who follow the crowd, because they don't get made fun of. Blessed are those who get into the right school, because they'll have a great life. Blessed, sometimes in the church, we say, blessed are those who are married, which is not one of the 8 Beatitudes. Blessed are those who live in Northern Virginia, or who are American, or who can buy a home, or all the different things you and I might say, well, if you do this, you are blessed because. Instead, what Jesus is saying, and again, it's important to notice, as Jesus is describing the kingdom of heaven, he's starting with blessings, not demands. That's worth thinking about as well. What Jesus is saying is, you and I are blessed when we run out of what we think will bless us and are faced with our desperate and dire need. That means when you are poor is when you are rich. Think for a second this morning of that place where you feel like you just don't have the resources you need. It could be school, if you're a college student. Maybe you didn't do so well this year, or you're thinking about going back in the fall. Maybe summer planning for your kids if you're a parent and out of school and you don't have the camps or the resources or things you've had before. Maybe it's work, or a difficult neighbor, a difficult family member. Maybe it's understanding and lovingly fighting the spirit of the age that we seem surrounded by, that is calling us not to find our identity in God and His community, but in ourselves. Maybe it's aging parents or a struggling child, particular habits that are conquering you, or a struggle with loneliness or sexual temptation. In that place, in your poverty, in your need, as you cry out to Jesus, you are blessed. Jesus is not saying that I expect you to pull up your bootstraps, or that He's angry with you that you have hit this poverty place. Jesus is saying, I know you can't do it. It's why I came. It's why my Father sent me. My Father knows too. Be with me. Offer those to me. The Beatitudes are full of us embracing this reality every day. You and I need this line of the Beatitudes literally every day. This simpler intro to the Sermon on the Mount. We never outgrow. Picture perhaps a child, and he's trying to pick up something really heavy, something way too heavy for him. And you and he are watching, and he's in front of you. And so you know that if you go over and say, do you want some help, before he gets to try, he'll say, no, I got it. Picture him trying and being unable to pick this up, to the point where he wears out and he falls down in frustration. And then you walk over and you say, can I help you with that? He's probably ready, or she's probably ready at that point to pick it up, because they've tried on their own and realized, I got nothing to give. I can't pick it up. It's too heavy for me. I want you again to think about your summer and that place that you have that feels like way too much. And I want you to imagine Jesus walking over to you and asking, can I help you with that? Can I help you? Because I know you're poor in spirit, and I know your need. And I brought a new kind of kingdom, not only one where your need is recognized and you are confronted bald-faced with it, but one where I am coming to help you meet that need. I will help you. I'll be the Father who embraces the prodigal son. This is fantastic news after the year we've all had, because there's so many of us who are poor in spirit and energy and hope and desire and passion. So as we turn to pray to close our time this morning, I again want to encourage you to think about that place and imagine Jesus saying, can I help you with that? Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for this line. And I ask for myself for the humility to pray this poverty of spirit every day. That as we look at these verses this summer, that you would be teaching and instructing me to cry out to you, to not be afraid, but to see, oh, I'm blessed when I acknowledge my desperate need, when I'm overwhelmed by my brokenness, when I see how I treat others, how selfish I am, that I would cry to you. I pray that you'd help my brothers and sisters to do that as well. And those places in the world, Lord, where it just feels like way too much, which is something we'll look at the next few weeks. Would you pick us up? Would you help us turn humbly to you and say, yes, you can help me with this. In your holy name, amen. Well, again, I hope we get to see you face to face. We will be together tonight, the 20th of June, in person at Cornerstone, and the 27th, and every Sunday going forward. If you've got particular needs going on or struggles, please again email me, dean@theascension.org, or Chris Lugo, our assistant. Let us know what's going on. He's Chris@theascension.org. God bless you this week. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.